Hello everybody, welcome to Minnesota Sports HQ. I'm Ben, and hope you guys are all doing well. Today's video, we're going to be doing a little live bracket challenge. I've made a few before, but I thought it might be cool to do one on camera for you guys, maybe bring some pointers along the way for some possible upsets, and hopefully rep the Golden Gophers along the way, hoping that they can make it to the home Final Four. I'm actually going to be going to the two Final Four games on April 6th at US Bank Stadium, so that'll be pretty cool. But without further ado, let's get straight into it. Please like and subscribe if you want some more of this kind of stuff. Maybe if it does well, maybe I'll do another one with a little bit different stuff. And I will put this one on one of the electronic ones so it scores it for me, and maybe I'll do a little reaction video for this as well. Let's get straight into it. Gonna turn my other camera on to record the bracket. Alright, now that that's done, I'm just gonna start with the second round. Gonna move on to the Sweet 16, and then the Elite 8, Final Four, and the Championship. I'm just not gonna go region by region, just so we can kind of spread the love a little bit. So let's get straight into it. So the first game, we have Duke versus the winner of North Carolina Central and North Dakota State. I have a feeling that North Carolina Central is going to come out of this one. They have a really good defense. North Dakota State, not really known for doing anything well, just kind of playing a crap conference. So I'm going to say North Carolina Central is going to make it out of there. But what do they get? They get to play Duke, so it's kind of unfortunate for them. Number one seeds are 135-1 in the first round, so I feel pretty confident in taking the one seed Duke here. And that'll probably be a common theme throughout my bracket, but let's move on to who Duke would be playing. VCU or UCF. Virginia Commonwealth obviously had a couple good tournament runs a couple years ago. They now play in the A10, kind of a bunch of washed-up teams that had some tournament success a couple years ago, versus the University of Central Florida, not only known as a football school. They also have a center who's about 7'6", Taco Falls. What a great name, what can you say? VCU doesn't really have that many great players anymore, so I'm going to say that number 9 UCF is going to take this one. And of course, they end up playing Duke in the second round, which is just unfortunate. Now, these next two games are two games that a lot of people have on their upset alerts. There's always a 5-12 upset. A 12 always beats a 5. It will always happen. And I think the main candidate this year is Liberty. They have a lot of wins this year. Mississippi State, not that great out of the SEC. Not sure how they have a 5 seed. They haven't beaten that many great teams. They kind of had an easy schedule, so that's why they're here. I'm actually going to take Liberty on this one. And as I write that in here, let's move on to the next game, which is Virginia Tech at the 4 seed versus the St. Louis Billikens at the 13 seed. St. Louis reaching their first tournament in a while, but Virginia Tech has beaten some good teams this year, although they were a part of the worst game in college basketball this year. They won by 23, but only scored 47 points against North Carolina State. But Virginia Tech beat Duke without Zion this year, so they're a pretty strong team. And I feel pretty confident with Virginia Tech advancing over the Billikens here. And if you see me use some abbreviations, don't worry about it. I'll make sure I get it right. That's why I'm writing every seed by everything, just so we make sure. Alright, now moving on to the 6-11 matchup in the East Division. Belmont versus Temple in the play-in games. Belmont is actually a really good team. Most people thought they should be like a 10 seed. It's really rare for a non-Power 5 team to get in without winning their conference championship, but here we are. A lot of people are picking Belmont to beat Maryland too, but you know, Maryland has Fernando. They have a lot of size down low, and I think that's what's going to get them into the second round. And then another game that people are projecting upsets for is Yale versus LSU. 3 versus a 14. LSU did really well in the SEC this year, but they're facing quite a bit of controversy after their coach kind of got caught giving money to players. So they're currently without a coach. And, you know, no pun intended, but Yale might outsmart them in this one. But I don't think that's going to happen. LSU has a lot of talent, and I think they'll advance there. So that next matchup between LSU and Maryland is going to be very interesting. Now, moving on to yours truly, the matchup, Louisville versus Minnesota. Richard Pitino, coach of Minnesota, previous experience with Louisville. Obviously, his dad coached there. There's a lot of bad blood going on right now. But if you want to see the video I did kind of previewing Minnesota's road to the Final Four, watch my previous video on my channel, and I'll take you through that. But, you know, sticking to theme, I probably won't pick us to win it all, but I think we probably have a 40% chance to beat Louisville as it is. So I'm putting Minnesota as moving on. Now, one of the flaws I see with this bracket here is that, well, if Minnesota wins, they pretty much get to play Michigan State in the next round. It used to be illegal for 2 conference teams to play each other in the second round, but now it's not anymore, and it's happened here, which is kind of unfortunate. But Michigan State, very good team. Big Ten, excuse me, the Big Ten is pretty much the best division in basketball, or the most competitive, I should say. And I don't think a double-digit loss non-Power 5 conference team is going to do much to stop Michigan State. So I'm thinking Michigan State here, and they'll end up taking on Minnesota in the second round, which is pretty unfortunate, I'm not going to lie. But that's the second round done for the East. Let's get straight into the West. Gonzaga is the 1 seed, facing the winner of Farley Dickinson and Prairie View A&M. Neither are really great teams. You know, it honestly doesn't really matter who wins this game. Gonzaga has a lot of good players, and there's another number 1 seed going straight through. Now, Syracuse versus Baylor, the 8 and 9. This is going to be a really fun game to watch. Jim Boeheim should be interesting to see what his Syracuse team does in this year's tournament, and I think they're going to get the win over Baylor here. Haven't really seen much from Baylor, even though the Big 12 kind of had quite a few good teams in it. Baylor hasn't really made me notice them at all, so I'm going to go with Syracuse there. Now, one of my favorite matchups of the first round, Marquette versus Murray State in the 5-12. Now, a lot of people are picking Murray State because Marquette is on a little bit of a downward run, but on their day, Marquette can beat anybody. And, you know, Murray State really only has 1 good player. You could argue Marquette only has 1 good player, Ja Morant versus Marcus Howard. Should be really exciting, but I think Marquette is going to go over the line due to Theo John and the Hauser twins. I don't really see anyone from Murray State matching up with them. So Marquette going through for me. And now let's move on to the 4-13, Florida State versus Vermont. Vermont winning their conference tournament on a bit of a hot streak. Florida State doing well, though, in the ACC tournament, considering, you know, you got Duke, Virginia, North Carolina, Virginia Tech in there. Tons of good teams in the ACC this year. So Florida State, I believe, made the semifinals of that tournament. They beat somebody good. But nevertheless, I think that will continue. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to pick all the favorites in this section of the bracket, even though it would be very easy to do so. There are a few matchups that I think are really interesting to watch. And the next game, speak of the devil, the Sun Devils, Arizona State versus St. John's in the play-in round. St. John's out of the Big East with some exciting players. Arizona State out of the Pac-12. I think that's the best play-in game, and whoever wins that gets to play Buffalo. And Buffalo is an exciting team. Finally got ranked this year. Their offense is pretty good. And, you know, you could argue that this is pretty much a coin flip, honestly. And I think, well, I don't think I have to put whoever wins. I think I can just do this and call it good, because I think that's all you need to do on the bracket challenge. But I think Buffalo is going to get upset in the first round. On my other brackets, I have Buffalo winning on both of those, but I don't know, just have a feeling on this one. Now, the next game, Texas Tech versus Northern Kentucky. This should be a fun one. Haven't really seen what Northern Kentucky's done this year, but Texas Tech doing really well in the Big 12. And like I said, so many good teams from that division, and that's who I'm bringing through to the next round. And now the last two matchups, Nevada versus Florida, 7-10. Florida has played really well this year, has a lot of close losses, and Nevada hasn't really been playing well the last couple weeks. And I think we could have ourselves an upset here. Nevada probably should be higher than a 7 seed, but Florida should definitely be higher than a 10 seed. And, yeah, there we go. Another upset picked. Now, I mean, Michigan versus Montana. I mean, do I really need to explain myself here? Michigan with Brodzikas, so many good players. That should be an easy win for them. Now, finally moving on to the other side. Number 1 Virginia playing another 16 seed, which could be interesting. If you don't get the inside joke, Virginia lost last year in the first round as a number 1 seed. But they're going to get over that. They're going to beat Gardner-Webb pretty much without a problem, hopefully. And there we go. That's straight in there. Now, a little bit of an interesting matchup here. You've noticed I've been saying that the Big 12 has done really well this year, and the SEC isn't the greatest. I mean, they have Kentucky, and Auburn, a few other teams are okay, but I don't know. I just have a feeling that the Big 12 is going to do pretty well this year, so I'm going to go with the 9 seed Oklahoma on this one. And yeah, let's move on to one of my favorite matchups of this year's tournament, which is Wisconsin-Oregon, another 5-12. Wisconsin out of the Big Ten has played pretty well this year, but Oregon is pretty much one of the hottest teams in the country right now. Just beat Washington to win the Pac-12 tournament, and I believe they've won 8 in a row. But I don't think they're going to be able to stop Ethan Happ and Wisconsin in this game. And I think Wisconsin, as much as I hate to say it as a Gopher fan, you have to admit that Wisconsin's pretty good. You have to respect the opponent. So that's what I'm doing here. Another group that a lot of people are pointing towards an upset for, the number 4 seed Kansas State versus the 13 UC Irvine Anteaters. It's going to be a good matchup, but like I said, I've been high on the Big 12 this year. I think Kansas State is going to come through with it. Now, here's going to be an interesting pick. Villanova versus St. Mary's. St. Mary's just beat Gonzaga, and Villanova did not look that great in the Big East tournament. So I'm going to go for a little upset here. St. Mary's are going to get past Villanova and move into the second round. Now, another Big Ten team, Purdue, facing Old Dominion, the 14 seed. I'm not too worried about Old Dominion. Purdue has a lot of talent, especially with 7'2" Harms at the center position, so I don't think they'll have too much trouble with that. Moving on to the second round. Now, here's another really good matchup. University of Cincinnati versus Iowa. Cincinnati playing in the AAC, Iowa out of the Big Ten. Cincinnati, I believe, won their conference tournament, and UCF in that as well. Along with, no, Middle Tennessee is not in that conference, but Cincinnati has beaten a lot of good teams this year. Iowa's a little weak at the center position, and I think Cincinnati could exploit that and move on into the second round. The 2-15 Tennessee versus Colgate. Tennessee with Admiral Schofield should be able to handle the 15 seed Colgate and move into the second round. Alright, let's move on to the Midwest with North Carolina and Iona. A lot of people actually think that this could be the 1 seed to fall, if any do. Apparently Iona's a good team, but I haven't really watched any of them this year, so I'm going to stick with North Carolina. And moving on, Utah State versus Washington. Now, this one is a tough one. Washington out of the Pac-12 has done pretty well this year, but Utah State, surprisingly good team. And I think they could prove some people wrong in this tournament. So that's what I'm going to go with. I'm going to go with 8, Utah State. And moving on to the 5-12 of this, Auburn versus New Mexico State Aggies. And Auburn, a good team out of the SEC. New Mexico State won their conference tournament. This is honestly a coin flip, but I think I'm going to stick with Auburn on this one. And moving on to the next game, it's Kansas versus Northeastern, the 4-13. Kansas kind of limped into the tournament. They haven't been playing that well. A couple people are picking Northeastern, actually, but I don't think Kansas loses yet. Bill Self knows how to coach, and I think they'll at least get to the next round. Now, one of my dark horses for this tournament, Iowa State out of the Big 12. What a surprise. My schools don't even go to the Big 12. I just like what the Big 12 has done this year in basketball. Playing the number 11 Ohio State. Now, Ohio State, not the greatest team, to be honest. Iowa State just won the Big 12 over Kansas, and I think they'll prove people wrong again and move on into the second round. Now, this next one, you guys aren't going to like me, but Houston, the 3 seed, I think they're going to lose to Georgia State. Georgia State has done many 3-14 upsets in their time, and I think they can do it again. I think they beat Houston. Houston's a little bit overhyped, I think. They don't play in a great conference. So I think Georgia State can do it, possibly. Now, moving on to the last 2 matchups of round 2, I'm just going to staple this one in here. It's Kentucky, it's March, you know what's going to happen. Abilene Christian, sorry, you're out. But now, a nice matchup, Wofford versus Seton Hall. Wofford actually ranked, but I think I'm going to go with Seton Hall here, just because I've really liked the Big East this year. It's been very competitive, and I think Seton Hall will advance. Alright, there's the second round done. Let's get straight into the Sweet 16. Duke UCF. I'm sorry, but a 7'6" player is not going to beat Duke by himself. I think Duke moves on here, unfortunately. Liberty, Virginia Tech. Liberty has a great chance here to advance to the Sweet 16. Like I said, Virginia Tech is very inconsistent, so I am going to roll with that. Number 12, Liberty to the Sweet 16. The Liberty Flames getting some love here. Now, Maryland, LSU. LSU without their coach. I think it's really going to hurt them in this matchup. Maryland has that size. So I'm going to go with Maryland here. And for me, this is where the road ends for Minnesota if we're lucky. Michigan State just has all the wrong matchups for us, and I think that they will continue into the Sweet 16. Very good tournament team, and I think a second-round appearance, just winning a game, would be great for Richard Pitino, honestly. Now, Gonzaga-Syracuse. I know Syracuse made the Final Four as a 10 seed last year, but Hachimura for Gonzaga isn't going to go for that. Gonzaga used to be the chokers that were the 1 seed, but they've proven to be a solid team and have pretty much impressed me. Now, a lot of people aren't going to like this, but another one of my dark horses this year is Marquette. I think they take care of Florida State. They just have a solid team out of the Big East, and Gonzaga versus Marquette would be a great matchup to watch. So I'm looking forward to that. Now moving on, Texas Tech versus Arizona State or St. John's. I think this is where Texas Tech moves on to the Sweet 16. And this is where Florida's magic ends too. I think Michigan is just too talented. They move on to the Sweet 16. There we go. We're reducing the teams now quite a lot. Virginia versus Oklahoma. Don't think Oklahoma is going to continue on past this, but you never know. I think Virginia moves on, but be careful here. I believe I have some ones losing soon. Moving on to Wisconsin, Kansas State. Dean Wade for Kansas is a good matchup against Ethan Happ. I think Kansas State takes this one, provided that Dean Wade is back from injury. I think Kansas State takes that one. Now, Purdue versus St. Mary's. The height is just going to continue to roll. I think Purdue moves on to the Sweet 16 because of their height and their ability to shoot the 3 with Carson Edwards and Josh Klein. Now, the 2-7, Tennessee versus Cincinnati. Here's where things get a little interesting for me. That's right. That's right. You're seeing this. Cincinnati is going to beat Tennessee. Tennessee has been a little inconsistent down the stretch, and I think we're going to see that here. And Cincinnati moves on into the Sweet 16. All right, North Carolina versus Utah State. Yes, North Carolina. Luke May is going to dominate this game. And yeah, there we are. North Carolina into the Sweet 16. Auburn, Kansas. This is a really tough one for me. Both have kind of limped to the finish line. A relatively unknown Auburn team at the beginning of the year. But I think Kansas just has enough to get to the Sweet 16. They kind of have an easy road, to be honest. But, you can't control it. All right, Iowa State, Georgia State. Iowa State is on a roll, and I don't see that changing. Here we go. Iowa State into the Sweet 16. And who are they going to match up with? Well, Seton Hall, Kentucky. I think Kentucky has just enough to not get upset here. I think that's going to be a really close game. Might surprise some people. But yeah, there's my Sweet 16. Let's get right into that. Duke, Liberty. I mean, it's Duke. What can you say? What can you say? That's where Liberty ends. Michigan State, Maryland. We've had this matchup a few times this year. Michigan State just playing all the Big Ten teams on their road to the Elite Eight. And I think they take care of Maryland. They just have too many players for Maryland. Now, here's where things get a little interesting. Yep, I'm doing it. Gonzaga is going to lose to Marquette. After seeing Marquette just go on these huge runs, I think Gonzaga is going to get taken down here. And it might not be pretty. It might not be what the people want to see, but I think it's going to happen. Now, Texas Tech, Michigan, I'm looking forward to this. I just think Michigan has a little too much for Texas Tech. I think the Big Ten competition really helped them this year, and I think that's going to bring them through. Now, I mean, what can you say here? Kansas State, Virginia. You guys ready for this? Here we go. Kansas State. Like I said, I had a lot of ones losing soon, and there we go. Proved it. Now, Purdue, Cincinnati. Cincinnati is so fast-paced versus Purdue's big guys. I think they really have a shot here, but I am going to say Purdue in this one. Well, because of the height, honestly. As a tall man myself, gotta love the height. Now, North Carolina versus Kansas. Like I said, Kansas isn't their usual self, so I am going to pick North Carolina to keep going into the Elite Eight. Now, this might be my favorite matchup if this happens in the entire tournament. Iowa State versus Kentucky. I think Iowa State gets this, honestly. They're a very exciting team, and I think this might be a year for them to do some damage. So, looking at this, I have 2 number 1 seeds, 2 number 2 seeds, a 3, a 4, a 5, and a 6 in the Elite Eight, which could happen. I am definitely one for upsets to say that, but you kind of have to if you want to have a chance at getting a really good bracket. Now here's the fun part, because these are where the points matter. Duke versus Michigan State. You know, Nick Ward is a really good matchup against Zion Williamson. They both have 3 really talented players. And you know what? Michigan State is going to beat Duke to make it to the Final Four. I don't know, guys. What can you say? I think it could happen. A lot of people are saying Duke is unstoppable this year, though. Now, Marquette versus Michigan. Really tough one. Also, I really don't want 2 Big Ten teams playing each other in the Final Four, though. So I think I just have to go for Marquette. Just so you guys don't call me biased for picking 2 Big Ten teams. No, I'm just kidding. I was going to pick that anyway. But alright, Kansas State versus Purdue. Like I said, do I want another Big Ten team in there? No, I really don't. How about Kansas State, then? Beating Purdue. In these late stages, depth really helps. And I don't know, it's never Purdue's year. They always show promise, but it's never Purdue's year. Alright, my dark horse, Iowa State. This is where they go out. I think North Carolina is going to be the only 1 seed to make it into the Final Four. 1 always does, so I'm just backing myself here. So I would love to see these games. Michigan State versus Marquette, Kansas State versus North Carolina. This would be really exciting. And you know what? Here we go. Number 2, or my bad, I wrote that wrong. Number 5, Marquette into the finals over Michigan State. Theo John versus Nick Ward is going to be good, but I think the Hausers and Marcus Howard should be able to take care of Cassius Winston and Josh Langford of Michigan State. Kansas State, North Carolina. I think it's going to be North Carolina moving into the finals. And there is our final of Marquette and North Carolina. This is funny because so many people have Murray State beating Marquette in the first round, but I think if Marquette gets on a little roll, I think they can go to the finals. But you want to know what's funny? It's really hard to pick a rival state's team to win the championship, but I think Marquette is going to win the national championship over North Carolina. And why not? I'll put a final score of 81 to 77. There it is, guys. The full bracket is done. This is going to go on my door. I'm going to do this on the ESPN Bracket Challenge, see how it goes, and maybe I'll react to this later and see how wrong I was, because let's be honest, is this going to go? Probably not, but I hope you guys enjoyed my analysis. Maybe you get some tips on who to pick for upsets from me. I think I gave you pretty much every upset that people are looking at right now. But yeah, hope you guys enjoy, and I'll have a nice little video coming out for you in the next couple days. Have a good night, everybody. I'll talk to you later.